Alright, everything I watched in June. The last one went on for way too long, so I'll try and keep this one mercifully brief. And I haven't watched a ton of stuff this month anyway, so I'll dive right in. Shrek 2. They were showing this at my local cinema. They'd showed Shrek 1 the week before, but we couldn't make it. But me and my sister went to Shrek 2. It was on at like 10 in the morning, which is crazy early for me to be up. And the idea was to get families in, get parents in with young kids. But there was no one else there. It was just us two. It was great. It was like a private screening. It was like, I love when that happens. You can just you can talk out loud. You don't have to whisper if you're talking through you can just chat out loud. It's really fun. And it's such a great fucking film. I hadn't seen it in a few years and I'd forgotten just how great it is. It truly is one of the best sequels ever made and basically a perfect movie. And so fucking funny. We've seen the film hundreds of times. We were laughing through the whole thing. So good. The First Omen. This I missed when it was in cinemas and then it came on to Disney Plus and I thought it was great. I actually, I kind of just stuck it on as background noise, but I ended up really getting into it. And I thought it was scarier than the original Omen. I've actually never found the original Omen to be that scary. I think it's kind of overrated. And you see it ranked as one of the greatest horror films ever made next to The Exorcist and The Shining and all these films. I don't quite think the Omen is quite that great. But this First Omen, this prequel, I actually thought was great. And these kinds of horror franchise prequels are usually so unnecessary. When they did Texas Chainsaw, The Beginning, or whatever it was called, and it's Leatherface's origin story or whatever. It's not necessary. I even talked about, in the last video, I talked about Prometheus and how, we didn't need a prequel about how did the aliens come to be. And I would have said, before I watched the First Omen, I would have been do we need a fucking whole movie about how Damien was born? But this was really great. I thought it was fantastic because it's about this satanic cult impregnating this unsuspecting woman with the Antichrist. It's way more Rosemary's Baby than The Omen, and I much prefer Rosemary's Baby to The Omen, so I'll take that any day. It was really great. Nell Tiger Free, who I'd never really seen in anything else. She was in Game of Thrones, but I don't even really remember her that well from Game of Thrones. But she was fantastic in this. She has a scene where she's demonic spirits seem to be taking over her body and she's writhing around and going crazy. And it reminded me of that scene in Possession, the subway tunnel scene in Possession, which when I watched it, I thought that's the best portrayal of demonic possession I've ever seen. That's even better than Linda Blair in The Exorcist. And this scene that Nell Tiger Free had towards the end of the First Omen was kind of similar. And the director, Arkasha Stevenson, she's directed TV shows, she's directed some episodes of Legion, she's directed some episodes of Channel Zero. This is her first movie. She's an exciting new voice in horror, because she uses this premise of, there's this young woman who comes to work at this orphanage run by the church, and within the church there's this conspiracy that they're trying to lure her there so they can impregnate her with the Antichrist, so they can bring the Antichrist to Earth. And she uses it thematically to explore these ideas of women's agency of their bodies, and these ideas that societal institutional forces are at play to take women's control of their own bodies away. And it's through this horror lens that she's being forcibly impregnated by a jackal demon to give birth to the Antichrist. But there's all these things, she goes out clubbing and then the next morning she can't quite remember what happened and she knows something bad happened, but she has no memory of it. And I just thought it was really interesting that Arkasha Stevenson, as the director, is weaving in this fictionalized genre horror story. She's kind of weaving in these real horrors that happen in women's lives. And there were some scenes in it that were just absolutely petrifying. Some of it is just gratuitous gore. It's a throwback to the scene from the First Omen where Damien's nanny throws herself out the window and hangs herself at the party. There's a similar sort of thing where there's in the courtyard, everyone's hanging out, and one of the nuns or one of the carers of the kids jumps out the window and hangs herself. But she also sets herself on fire, so they go even crazier with it. But there's things where the Nell Tiger Free character, she gets locked away in some dark room somewhere, and the woman who burned herself, her burnt, charred corpse, is standing in the corner of the room giggling to herself, and she just gets closer and closer, and it's this horribly sustained sequence that was just so brilliantly directed. See, I was kind of blown away how much I liked the First Omen, because I'm not even an Omen fan, and these prequels always seem so unnecessary, but this one was great. South Park, The End of Obesity. This was South Park's take on Ozempic and all these weight loss medications people are taking. It was really funny. It was all around Cartman trying to get his hands on some Ozempic so he can lose weight. Because he thinks if he's thin, then the people who bully him, or when he's in arguments with people, they won't have anything to come back at him with because they always just call him fat. But if he loses weight, then they won't have that in their arsenal, and he can just make fun of people freely. That's his idea anyway. And going into it, I really didn't know anything about the whole Ozempic thing. I mean, I've heard of it, and I know that certain celebrities suddenly are very thin, and it's been linked to Ozempic, but, you know, I didn't know what it was actually for. I didn't know what doctors were prescribing it for, or, and how it's, in America anyway, the pharmaceutical industry can twist things and, you know, take this medication that's been developed to help people with health problems and turn it into a cash cow product that they can sell. And that's generally how I get my news. Like, why bother reading articles about stuff when you can just wait for South Park to do their episode on it? Ice Age Collision Course. This came on Netflix. I don't know why I watched it, really, because I'm an adult. But I've seen all the others, I guess. I guess I'm a completionist. And, you know, it's okay. It's all right. The voice cast are always amazing, and, you know. But ever since Ice Age The Meltdown, which I think was the second one, every single one has just been like a natural disaster's coming and everyone has to run away from it. Like the continental drift, or now this thing is a big meteor asteroid coming. I suppose Dawn of the Dinosaurs was kind of a different thing. But even that was like, dinosaurs and woolly mammoths didn't like coexist, as far as I know. But yeah, Ice Age Collision Course, you know, it's alright. It's all about Manny's daughter has a new boyfriend and Manny doesn't like him. And so it's just like all the cliches of like, you know, why him, or guess who's coming to dinner, this kind of thing, where it's, you know, the dad doesn't approve of the daughter's boyfriend. There's no new ground being broken. Welcome to Wrexham Season 3, finished this month. It seemed like much shorter than the other seasons. The other seasons, I swear, had like 15, 20 episodes. This one had like 7. But yeah, I enjoy watching it. I particularly enjoyed when they went to the set of Deadpool and everything had to be blurred out except for Rob and Ryan's faces. I mean, I'm sure it was just a gag. I don't think that was like a real thing, but you know, it was fun. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. I thought this was fucking awesome. This was great. This was, I don't know if it's quite as great as Fury Road, just because Fury Road is like the absolute perfect action movie where the storytelling is told, you know, as visually as possible, with as little dialogue and exposition as possible, and it sets it up nice and early, and then it's just a feature-length car chase with, like, the greatest car stunts you've ever seen. Whereas this is a much bigger, broader story. It's a much bigger canvas and a more episodic structure where, you know, you start out with Furiosa as a little kid, and then you see how she ended up with Immortan Joe, and, you know, when it gets going, it really gets going. It's got kind of a slow start, but I thought Anya Taylor-Joy was great as Furiosa. That's like, she has another feather in her cap now as action hero. That's another cool thing she can do. And Chris Hemsworth, I fucking loved in this. I thought he was so good as the villain. He was so fucking funny. And it's, you know, typically the George Miller style and the Mad Max style is that there's like as little dialogue as possible, and you convey character through other things. But with Chris Hemsworth's character in this Dementus, it's so much of his character is through the way he talks, and he's very verbose. And, you know, his whole thing is that he'll just keep rambling on and saying whatever bullshit he has to say to get himself out of whatever trouble he's in. And it was so much fun to watch, and Chris Hemsworth was having so much fun with it. And all the stuff about, you know, the usual prequel bullshit of, you know, how did Han Solo get the Millennium Falcon? How did he get the dice that hang from the, you know, with Furiosa, that stuff was really cool. Like, the main thing being, how did she lose her arm? George Miller came up with a fucking badass way for her to lose that arm. And, you know, the whole thing is about Anya Taylor-Joy's out for revenge against Chris Hemsworth, and she's been seeking revenge against him for years and years. And so it culminates in her getting the revenge. And, like, it has to live up to expectations. I mean, if you build it up that much and for that long, you know, and then she just shoots him in the head, that's, like, such a letdown. But the thing George Miller came up with that is how Furiosa gets revenge against Dementus is so beautifully twisted and fucked up and so Mad Max, you know. Like, and I don't want to spoil what it is, but it's so good. And Tom Burke, who I thought was amazing in The Souvenir, the Joanna Hogg film, The Souvenir, where he played, you know, the toxic, gaslighting boyfriend who is addicted to heroin, and anytime his girlfriend questions, like, are you high right now? Have you been selling my jewelry to buy heroin and all this kind of stuff? He just keeps denying it, keeps gaslighting her, and it's, I mean, it's horrible to watch, because it's kind of like emotional abuse, but, you know, that's the point of it, and he played into it so well. And in Furiosa, he plays such a more likable character. He was so good in it. It was great. I thought it was a great fucking film. It'll probably be in my top 10 at the end of the year, and it's, was very disappointing that it's been such a letdown at the box office, because it's so good, and it was, you know, the big screen made it such a great experience, and it's sad, frankly, that not many people are getting to experience that. Lake Mungo. This was creepy as hell. This was so fucking unsettling. It's like it's not found footage in the way that like Blair Witch or Cloverfield are, where it's just the characters carrying the camera around. It's like a horror mockumentary. It's like a true crime documentary about a girl who's gone missing under mysterious circumstances. But it's all fictional, but it's made like it's they have like archive family photos and things that are all fabricated, but they look so real. And they basically reuse this one thing over and over again, where it's like they'll have like security footage of the back garden, or they'll have like a camera set up of the family having dinner, and you'll just see like a figure in the corner or in the background just kind of like standing there. And they kind of just do that over and over again. But that is in itself is so effective and so unsettling. I thought it was great. It was so scary. The Acolyte. This I've been kind of enjoying. It's not great. It's not like mind-blowing in the way that Andor or like the early Mandalorians were. But it's not like a Book of Boba Fett disaster. I thought it was really interesting how they set up the mystery and how they set up the reveal of the twin thing, where you're led to believe that this seemingly nice person, seemingly good person is a killer because we've seen her kill someone, to then be like, evil twin. It's a classic twist, but I thought they pulled it off really well. And I like the Kill Bill aspect of it, that the evil one, May, is like going around crossing off all the Jedi on her list. Although it's, the Jedi didn't start the fire that killed everyone. She's the fucking one who started the fire. If she wants to get revenge on someone for killing her family, she should look in the fucking mirror. But that's kind of the point of the character, is that she can't see that. She can't accept her own culpability. She just wants to point the blame elsewhere, which is a very human trait and a very annoying thing that people do. And Amanda Stenberg is such a great actor. She's been doing a really great job of playing both of them as totally distinctive characters. That Osha is the good one, and like your typical Star Wars hero, bright-eyed kid, wants to do the right thing, and the world's complicated, kind of like Luke Skywalker. And then with the evil one, with May, she's just playing her as a total villain, but kind of a conflicted villain. She's not just, evil for evil's sake. There's some humanity buried in there, and Amanda Stenberg plays that wonderfully. And the creature design has been amazing, and I love to see a Wookiee Jedi. I thought that was a cool concept. It's, I don't know why it's been so viciously received. I mean, I kind of know why, but I don't bump into this idea that if this witch coven created these twins with the Force, that somehow makes Anakin any less special. It makes sense that the Force, that this thing that exists in the entire world and every living being, wouldn't only be channeled through this binary construct of Jedi and Sith and light side and dark side. It makes sense that other people with mystical powers have channeled it in other ways, and you've seen these witches kind of use the Force, or whatever I can't remember what they call it. But, I don't think it destroys the lore, or it destroys Star Wars, or anything. And, it's all made up. It's all made up bullshit that happening in a galaxy far, far away. None of it's real. I had a comment the other day, like, what do you think of the Acolyte destroying history? And it's like, history? It's not fucking history. None of this really happened. If you say Napoleon was a good guy, that's changing history. This is just a Star Wars show for kids. Fucking calm down. The Shining, they showed this down at the cinema as well, and they showed it last year, and I went to watch it last year, and they had claimed it would be the longer American cut as opposed to the butchered 2-hour European cut. And it wasn't. They just showed the 2-hour European cut. But this time they actually did show the longer version. They actually showed the 2-hour 20 American cut, which is just undeniably a better movie. I mean, the whole arc of the movie is that they move into this hotel, and you're in the hotel with them, and then while you're stuck in this hotel, they all lose their mind, you lose your mind. None of it makes sense. It just gets crazier and crazier, up to an ambiguous ending. And all that stuff works great in both versions. But in the European version, it's kind of like that the whole film. None of it really makes sense because they cut out all the stuff that makes it make sense. But in the American version, there's all this stuff early on where Wendy has a doctor come in to see Danny, and then she's speaking to Wendy afterwards, and Wendy's saying that about how Jack used to have a drinking problem and he hit Danny, and then he promised never to drink again. And that adds so much more context later on when he goes into the bar in the gold room, and the first ghost he sees is a bartender who gives him a whole bottle of whiskey on the house. And suddenly that makes so much sense of everything. that his alcoholism is the key to everything, and that he's, you know, the ghosts of the Overlook. Their whole thing is we're gonna get this guy to murder his family, just like we got Delbert Grady to murder his family. And the way to get Jack to do that, the way to sort of manipulate him, is give him some booze. It's obviously it's a longer film, and you definitely feel the extra 20 minutes, but it just plays as a better story that way. Under Paris. This one really blew up on Netflix this month. It became like a worldwide blockbuster. I actually watched it before it was trending, before it was Netflix's #1. I just turned on Netflix the day it came out, and it was like, Under Paris, we've got this new film about a shark, a killer shark in the Seine. And, you know, I'll watch any film with a shark in it. I don't need it to be as good as Jaws. It's never going to be as good as Jaws, and most of them are crap. But I'll take a crappy shark film, you know, with a couple of cool shark attack sequences, or even if it's funny. There's this Australian shark film, I think it was called like The Reef or something. And through the whole film, they're all like, Shark! Shark! And it was the funniest thing ever. But, you know, I watched Under Paris, and I thought, this is pretty shit. This is just another shitty addition to the shitty bargain bin of shitty shark films. And then, in the next few days, there was a huge hype around it, and I was seeing all these articles like, Under Paris, the best shark movie since Jaws. Which I don't buy at all. It's, you know, Deep Blue Sea was way better than this, and Open Water was way better than this, and even like The Shallows and The Meg, which aren't great by any stretch. I mean, there's flaws in both those films, but they're much better than Under Paris, you know? Under Paris just rips everything off Jaws. You've got the mayor who won't close the beach, or it's not the beach, it's the triathlon in the Seine. But the mayor is like, you know, for some reason it would be worse politically to let the triathlon happen and let people die than to stop the triathlon and save people's lives. And there's a whole sequence where a couple of them go down and look at a sunken boat in the middle of the night, to see where it's been attacked by a shark. It was just like every cool, memorable thing you remember from Jaws, they just crammed into this Under Paris. And I thought it was really stupid the way they used the sharks in the river as like a really weak, heavy-handed metaphor for climate change. Like they're supposed to represent climate change. There was one really powerful image at the beginning when you see like the main character's tragic backstory where her whole team got killed by a shark. And you just see that the surface of the ocean is just covered in rubbish. That was actually a really powerful image. But that's not enough to make a great film. There's a couple of cool shark attack sequences. The CGI isn't great, but it's basically a made-for-TV film, so what you expect. But it was a terrible movie. I honestly, I watched it, and as soon as it ended, I was like, that was shit. That's an hour and a half I'm not getting back. Reservoir Dogs is another one they've shown at the cinema. And I love it so much, it's like that's how you make a first movie. It's small scale and it's relatively low budget. It's doable for a first-time director making an independent film. But it has everything that would make his other films great. It's got the needle drops on the soundtrack, and it's got the unforgettable sequences of violence, and the dialogue between the characters is so rich and funny, and the characters are so well developed and who they are, and the cast are great. Considering Harvey Keitel was really the only established actor in it at the time, but considering that Tim Roth and Steve Buscemi and Michael Madsen have all gone on to become such huge names, it's like a testament to how great of a cast this was. Considering it's a tiny indie movie with not a lot of money to go around. Tarantino found a bunch of people who were just about to take off, and he got them at the ground floor of their career. And the way it unfolds is so good that you don't see the heist, but it's gone horribly wrong, and then you gradually get everyone's backstories of how they came to be involved in the heist, and then you get snippets of them all trying to race back to the warehouse and what happened to the ones who didn't make it, how did they die. It's just a really incredible film. It's still one of Tarantino's best, and just one of the best crime films, and it still holds up today. I mean, when they're talking about pop culture and things, they're talking about Christy Love and Pam Grier, and not everyone's going to get that reference today, but the clip of the dialogue and the snappiness of it all, the repartee between all the characters, that holds up. Vice Principals. I rewatched Vice Principals. I fucking loved the show when it was on. It only went for 2 seasons, and that was the plan from the beginning. They planned from the very beginning. They'd written all the episodes of both seasons. And, season 1 ends on a big cliffhanger, and then season 2 launches into the fallout of that cliffhanger leading up to the proper ending. And the whole thing is tied together by Danny McBride and Walton Goggins. you know, both individually hilarious and both individually great actors, and together have such an amazing chemistry. It's literally like Paul Newman and Robert Redford in terms of taking these two phenomenal actors who can carry a thing on their own and be the star of their own thing, and putting them together to combine forces and make something even greater than their individual efforts. You know, that's Danny McBride and Walton Goggins in this show, and Vice Principals. It's such a good show, and such, you know, it's an easy binge because it's only like 2 seasons and then they were done. The Innocents. This is the film version of Turn of the Screw with Deborah Kerr, and it was kind of like, you know, it wasn't the first sort of haunted house film, and it wasn't the first gothic horror film, but it succeeds spectacularly at both those kinds of subgenres. But I think it was the first like psychological thriller, or one of the first, where it was like Carnival of Souls. It was like one of those earliest films to use the camera and the editing to show a character going insane. You know how you can use shot reverse shot to show a character sees something out of a window, and then you cut back to them, and then cut back to out the window, and the thing's gone from out the window, like they were either hallucinating it or they scuttled off very quickly, or, you know, and you've got this character questioning their own reality, and because the camera's putting you in their position, like, I swear there was just a little boy in that garden, now he's gone. You're kind of going crazy too, and you're questioning the reality of it too. And it's, you know, those kinds of techniques have gotten so well worn now. They've been in every fucking horror film for the past 50 years. But it was like interesting to see where it came from. And the director, Jack Clayton, had a really tight grasp on, you know, it's not like, oh, this is the technique, but they would do it so much better later on. Like, he nailed it out of the gate. Transformers Rise of the Beasts. This is another one like Ice Age Collision Course, where I'm looking back now like, why did I even watch that? But, you know, it came on Paramount Plus, and I don't know, I was kind of interested to see what a non-Michael Bay directed Transformers film would look like, because this one was directed by Stephen Capel Jr., who did Creed 2, which I thought was great. So I thought, I don't know, I'd give it a go. And it's slightly better than the Michael Bay ones. I mean, it's a bit more coherent and a bit more focused on story and character and not explosions and noise. But it kind of, like, I loved Bumblebee. Bumblebee to me was like, you know, a fresh start for the Transformers franchise, where it had all this heart that it didn't have before. Because Bumblebee basically is E.T. with a giant robot, which I suppose is the Iron Giant. You know, it was dressed up as a Transformers movie, and it had all the big robots fighting each other, but it was also just a coming-of-age film. And this doesn't have that. It's dressed up as a Transformers film, and it also has this other thing. You know, it's just a Transformers movie. It's just a bunch of big robots beat the shit out of each other in the name of random MacGuffins, you know. We're gonna get this key to this lock, or Unicron's gonna come and destroy the world. And, you know, it's all just bullshit. And the big final battle was just a Marvel style, you know, the digital camera swoops around as a bunch of CGI, super-powered people beat the shit out of each other. You know, it all ended up being very bland, very generic, and the ending kind of sets up a crossover with G.I. Joe. And when that happens, I'll actually be kind of excited for that, because I think a Transformers G.I. Joe crossover could be really cool. But this on its own is just a mediocre Transformers film. But I don't know what I expected. Friday the 13th Part 2. This one, I'd never seen the second one before. I'd only ever seen the first one. So this is the first one where Jason is the killer. In the first one, you're led to believe it's Jason, but really it's Pamela Voorhees, Mrs. Voorhees, his mom, who's out for revenge against the age group that let her son die. Because it's not the same people who did it. But anyway, yeah, this is the first one where Jason's the villain. And, you know, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good slasher. It's very by the numbers, very formulaic, but it delivers the goods. It has some cool kills. The Stepford Wives. This is a rare case where I've read the book. Well, it's rare that I've ever read any book that any film was based on. This is a rare case where I've read the book before I've seen the film. I'd never seen the film, but I read the book a few years ago. And the book was fantastic. And this adaptation was fine. You know, it does deliver every plot point of the book, but it doesn't like grab you like the book does. The book is like a total page turner. It's like, you know, it keeps building and building and building, and the walls are closing in, and you start to think the more she gets to know about this conspiracy, the less safe she is, and the less time she has to get away, if she can get away at all. And it just kind of barrels towards this like nail-biting climax and this horrible, horrifying twist ending. And the movie has all that. It does, you know, it's almost like they did use the actual book as the script, because everything that happens in the book does happen in the film. But it just doesn't build that suspense in the same way. It doesn't have you on the edge of your seat guessing what's going to happen. And it might just be because I've read the book, so I know what's going to happen. But I don't know, I just remember reading the book was a gripping read, and this wasn't quite such a gripping watch. Eastbound and Down. After finishing Vice Principals, I rewatched Eastbound and Down, going back through the Danny McBride catalog. I'm thinking of maybe doing a video about Danny McBride, because I just love him so much. But Eastbound and Down is so fucking good. It's such a great, Kenny Powers is such a great character where he has so much bravado, but also is deeply vulnerable and deeply human. And it's, in the hands of someone else, he might not have come off as such a lovable character, but this is Danny McBride's bread and butter. And Steve Little as Stevie is so fucking funny, like the Sancho Panza to his Don Quixote, like the gullible, naive sidekick who sticks by this guy through thick and thin, and like buys into his bullshit that he is like the second coming of Jesus when everyone else can see he's just a dick to everyone. Maudie. It's a really interesting little biopic about a painter who, like an arthritic painter who painted through the arthritis. Maud Lewis, played by Sally Hawkins, and Ethan Hawke played her husband, Everett Lewis. And he was such a prick through the whole time. Like, that was, to me, that was the most impressive sort of acting feat. Was like how hard it must be to go into work every day and be an arsehole to Sally Hawkins, who just seems like the sweetest, nicest person ever. But both she and Ethan Hawke were fantastic in this. It was a really interesting look at this relationship. It was more about their relationship than it was about the paintings. And she's just a nice person who's friendly and kind to everyone. And he's a total dick who's just a dick to everyone. It was interesting. It was very well acted and very well directed, and kind of like an interesting look into someone's life. And it was a real life. She really lived and became a famous painter, despite barely being able to hold a paintbrush. And coming from very humble, tragic beginnings, where like moving in with Ethan Hawke and being essentially his like servant at first, that was like a step up. And then and then eventually they get married. Hitman on Netflix, the Richard Linklater film. This was amazing. Glenn Powell was so fucking fantastic in it as and it was such a good sort of subversion and deconstruction of the Hitman genre, where it points out like the phoniness of the Hitman myth that's been created by movies like John Wick and Le Samurai and Leon. And he like goes undercover, pretends to be a hitman, and kind of just plays on what the public's perception of a hitman is, to lure them into giving him some money, and then the cops can arrest them for soliciting a hitman. But the acting was phenomenal and so layered. Like, Glenn Powell obviously is so charismatic and so funny, but the way he can play Gary Johnson as this mild-mannered kind of nobody, and then he takes on this guise of Ron the hitman. He starts to like how it feels to be Ron, and how he has the confidence to be really outspoken and really kind of like charismatic and outgoing as the hitman character when he's sort of wearing a mask as Ron. And then it becomes a really interesting love story when he like falls for one of the kind of the marks, played by Adria Arjona, who's amazing. She's like one of the breakout stars of the year. The fact that it becomes this weird romance where they start dating each other and she thinks he's a hitman and he's just making it up and his name's not even Ron, and I don't want to spoil what the kind of climax is, but the Notes app scene is absolutely mind-blowing. That was so spectacularly acted and written, and just the way it is the culmination and payoff of this whole movie. I thought it was fucking fantastic. I mean, I love Richard Linklater. I mean, I love School of Rock and Dazed and Confused are like in my top 5 all time. And I think Hitman will be in my top 10 of this year, because it was just so good, so funny. I got such a kick out of it. The Incredible Jessica James. There's an interesting little rom-com on Netflix where Jessica Williams from Booksmart and Chris O'Dowd play like two people who've just got out of big relationships and they're not quite over their exes yet. And they start seeing each other and they follow each other's exes, so they don't have to follow their exes, but they can also still keep up to date on what their exes are up to. It was really funny, and their chemistry was really great. And, I'm easy. I love a good rom-com, and this was a good rom-com. The Bear. I rewatched season 1 and 2 of The Bear before season 3 was coming out. And, I already loved it. I already thought it was one of the best shows on TV, and I love the naturalism of it. Where it's everyone acts in kind of a heightened way, but it feels so realistic. And it's so accurate to the stress of working in a kitchen, which I've never actually done. I've never worked in a kitchen, but I've worked at a bar where there was a kitchen. So I was adjacent to that chaos. But Christopher Storer is such an incredible writer where he can... this show feels like such a slice of life. It feels like they just planted a camera in the kitchen of an actual restaurant where actual chefs are working. But it's so entertaining, it's so funny, or it's so sad at times, or it's, it's heartbreaking to see, like, there's so much yelling because in the Borsato family, that's how you communicate. That's what the environment they were raised in, was screaming matches all the time. So that's how they live as adults. And Jeremy Allen White and Io Debris and Ebon, I'm going to mispronounce this horribly, but Ebon Moss Backrack as Richie. they're all such incredible actors in that cast, and they're all so funny, but also like there's so much humanity in their performances and so much naturalism that you buy them as real people. And you know, like a character like Richie in the hands of another actor would just come off as annoying because it's so much bluster. But the way that Ebon Moss-Bachrach plays him, you know, there's also a deep underlying vulnerability, and there's so much bluster because he's covering up for his own insecurities. And, you know, every actor in the cast is like that, where there's so many layers to the performance and to the character. It's an incredible show, and that Fishers episode, the Christmas episode, that's going to go down in history as one of the all-time great episodes of TV. New York, New York is one of the only Martin Scorsese films I hadn't seen. I kind of wish it had stayed that way. It's not very good. Here's the issue with New York, New York is that Scorsese had just made Mean Streets and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and Taxi Driver all back to back. And critics like Pauline Kael and Roger Ebert were saying he's the greatest director who ever lived. He's gonna be an icon for the decades to come. He has such a unique vision of cinema, and he makes, every time he gets behind the camera, he makes one of the best movies ever made. And they were right. I mean, he, to this day, endures as one of the most respected and revered and incredible filmmakers out there. But, you know, when a young man is told that he's the greatest artist in the world and everything he touches turns to gold, you know, he's gonna go and make something like New York, New York. New York, New York is kind of like the common criticism of it, which I think is absolutely on the money, is that it's dressed up as a glitzy golden age of Hollywood style musical. And the musical numbers are incredible. Liza Minnelli is incredible when she, you know, gets up on stage and she sings, and the way Scorsese shoots it and what everyone's wearing and the choreography. It is magical, but it also has this bleak, gritty, new Hollywood realism to it, where as soon as Liza Minnelli steps off the stage and goes home to her husband Robert De Niro, there's like a horrible, bitter argument, or they get into a huge fight, and it's just really uncomfortable and horrible to watch. And those two things don't quite mesh. That you have the colorfulness of Singing in the Rain and the bitter, horrible marital strife of Raging Bull crammed into the same movie. And it's so fucking long. It's like 3 hours long. You know, I kept like checking when I was watching on DVD, I kept checking like how far from the end it was, because it just seemed to keep going on and on and on. You know, something like, it's probably about the same length as Goodfellas, but Goodfellas feels 10 times shorter. It goes 10 times faster. And it's good. The Matrix. This was shown on at the cinema, and honestly, like a lot of the times, you know, I go and watch a lot of old films at the cinema, probably more than I watch new films. You know, like for example, just this month there was Shrek 2 and there was The Shining, but it's usually not like that different of an experience from watching it on DVD at home. It's just on a bigger screen, and I'm perfectly happy with that. I'm perfectly happy to, you know, watch a DVD of a film I love on a much bigger screen with a crowd. But with The Matrix, it actually felt like I was watching it for the first time again. It actually felt like a whole different experience to see it on a big screen. You know, it was mind-blowing. I mean, the action scenes, the gunfight in the lobby, and the helicopter crashes into the building, and all the glass breaks, and then at the end there's like the big foot chase as Neo's being chased by the agents, trying to get to the phone so he can get back into the real world, and he transforms into the One, and he realizes he can bend the Matrix to his will. All that stuff was so fucking spectacular on a big screen. I mean, it really was. This wasn't just like watching the DVD on a bigger screen. This was like a whole new experience of the Matrix I'd never had, because I've only ever seen it on DVD. I was 1 year old when it came out in cinemas, so I never got to see it in cinemas. So yeah, that was like, it was different. It wasn't like, it felt different. It felt like I was watching it for the first time again. It was amazing. Inside Out 2, I did a whole video review of this, so I won't rehash that, but what a fucking movie. What a wonderful movie. And what a great comeback for Pixar. You know, I remember when I went to watch it, well, the first time I went to watch it, when I went on the opening day, like first show, and it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and there was not only like parents there with their kids, there was also like adults were there, and there was like teenagers, like couples, and groups of teenagers were there, who must have been like little kids when Inside Out 1, because when Inside Out 1 came out, I was like 17, but I still went to the cinema and cried my eyes out. But there are kids who will have been little kids who were Riley's age when Inside Out 1 came out, who are now Riley's age in Inside Out 2 when Inside Out 2 comes out. And I talked about this in my review, but it understands anxiety so well, and they made anxiety such a weirdly lovable character. Like, one of my main points in the review was They don't just treat anxiety as this horrible evil monster. You know, they present her, and Maya Hawke plays her as someone who's trying to help Riley. Her frantic planning for the future and scary what-if scenarios, she thinks are helping Riley, because that's what anxiety does. It thinks it's helping you by preparing you for things that aren't going to happen. But all it does is stress you out and give you panic attacks. And so it's the character of anxiety, as played by Maya Hawke, is such a perfect personification of anxiety that it's like well-meaning but so unbelievably destructive. Yeah, I loved Inside Out too. And, you know, watching it was like at 11 in the morning, everyone's going crazy. There's a huge crowd, everyone's loving it. And I just thought to myself, like, this is going to be the movie of the summer. And like 8 hours later, the box office comes in and it's as big as Barbie and it's going to be $1 billion. It's going to be the biggest thing of the summer. And I was like, I was right. The Boys season 4. The Boys is back on Amazon, and it's I've been loving it. I've also been loving watching like far-right fans who have always thought Homelander was the good guy finally realizing that they are the target of the show's satire. It only took 4 seasons, but the alt-right MAGA crowd has finally realized this is a show that is ripping the piss out of them. This is not a show that is on their side in the debate of fascism versus democracy. But yeah, the show continues to delight. I think, I always, you know, I love Simon Pegg, but I've always thought his American accent as Huey's dad was very shaky and very, distracting. But then he came in season 4 and he delivered a phenomenal fucking performance in, you know, I won't spoil what happened, but, you know, if you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about. And Anthony Starr as Homelander continues to be like one of the great villain performances of all time. I love that whole episode where he went back to the place where he was raised as a kid with superpowers, and we start to see why he became so fucked up and so sociopathic, because there were these scientists who were just treating him like shit and torturing him and laughing at him all the time, and he comes back to their facility, and now he has all the cards, and he turns it on them, and he tortures them, and he laughs at them, and it's, Anthony Starr played that so well. He seemed to have so much fun playing into that, like, twisted scenario. So yeah, I've been loving the new season of The Boys. Logan, I rewatched Logan, because I want to do a video about Logan to capitalize on the Wolverine hype with Deadpool coming out. So I won't spoil anything I'm planning for the video, but another great fucking movie. I mean, this is one of my absolute favorites. I think this is like, in terms of like the greatest comic book movies ever made, it's definitely on par with The Dark Knight. I might even personally think it's better than The Dark Knight. But anyway, we'll get into all that in the video. House of the Dragon Season 2. There's another one that's back with a great new season that I'm loving so far. And that first episode got off to a little bit of a slow start, but holy shit, the ending of that first episode. I wasn't expecting that. Even in the Game of Thrones universe, where horrible, dark shit happens all the time, I was not expecting that to happen. And it set up such a great arc for this season. Because I thought the whole season would be about how's Rhaenyra gonna get revenge against Alicent. But then for that to happen in episode 1, and it's such a horrible thing, and it's a miscommunication. It wasn't even what Rhaenyra wanted to happen, but now it's happened. It looks like she ordered it. That's such a great setup. Quiz Lady. I rewatched Quiz Lady because my friend Harry was around. We wanted to watch a good comedy, and we settled on Will Ferrell, but we were going through all these Will Ferrell films that we'd seen recently or that we'd seen a million times. And then he was saying, well, is there any good recent Will Ferrell films that I maybe have missed? And I was thinking, not really, because a lot of the recent ones have kind of sucked. But then I remembered Quiz Lady, which he doesn't have a huge role in it, but he's the host of the game show, and the whole movie revolves around the game show. And it took some convincing, because a film called Quiz Lady sounds like a piece of shit. It sounds like it's just going to be a generic, straight-to-streaming comedy where, you know, you just cram 2 words together, and it's like, you know, lifeguard school, or rock and roll babysitter, or, you know, just cram these 2 things together like, oh, what a kooky premise. But Quiz Lady should have been such a bigger hit than it was, because that's one of the funniest fucking films I've seen in recent memory. But it didn't really make a splash at all, even though it was very well received by critics. And I think it was kind of hobbled by the title, because the title doesn't sound intriguing at all. You say to someone, hey, do you want to watch this new movie, Quiz Lady? And they'll say, no, thank you. Because that's what Harry said. I had to promise him, no, it's so much better than the title makes it sound. But, yeah, if you want to watch something funny, and you're not sure about the title Quiz Lady, ignore the title. Just watch the film. It's so funny. It's so wonderful. Inside Out 2. I went to watch Inside Out 2 again. A couple of days later with my dad and my sister, and we had a great time. This one, the first time I went to watch it, the kids in the room were a lot less unruly than they were in this one. There was kids running around and screaming, and if it wasn't such a great fucking movie, those little bastard kids would have ruined it, would have ruined the experience. But it's so good that it overcomes the shittiness of people's kids. the end we start from. This came on Netflix, and it was billed as like Jodie Comer has to get her baby across a post-apocalyptic wasteland. And post-apocalyptic wasteland, I'm thinking The Last of Us, or Mad Max, or Fallout, or something like that. But the apocalypse is really just really, really heavy rain, which we have a lot in the UK anyway. Where Jodie Comer's been like flooded out of her house in London, and she has to go and find shelter, and so it was, I guess I wasn't expecting such a realistic depiction of the apocalypse, where it's not going to be a fungus grows into people's brains and turns them into flesh-eating zombies. It's just going to be, it rained really bad and now London's flooded and we have to live elsewhere and find food. But Jodie Comer was absolutely fantastic in it, as always. You know, she was phenomenal. The Bear Season 3, this just came out, and I was planning to space it out and not binge it, because I feel like, you know, you wait so long for these shows to come out, and then if they release all the episodes in one day, you can watch them all in one day. Bill Burr has the perfect analogy for it. He says it's like getting a bottle of really fine wine and then shotgunning the whole thing when you get like a really great TV show and you race through the entire season in one day. So I was going to watch, you know, maybe one episode of The Bear a day or something, or try and, you know, space it out and really be able to reflect on what was happening in each one. But, you know, I binge watched the whole thing in the last 2 days. But I thought it was great. I've seen it get some mixed reviews, which I feel like happens with any TV show. You know, any TV show that's that widely acclaimed, where it's called one of the greatest shows ever made and one of the greatest shows on TV for 2 seasons, and then season 3 comes out. The same thing happened last year with Ted Lasso, where suddenly the critics are wanting to poke holes in it because it's been so highly acclaimed and it's set such a high standard. But I thought season 3 was great. I mean, it doesn't have an episode that's quite on the level of that Fish's Christmas episode, but it had some really wonderful episodes. I love that one about Tina's backstory, where you find out how she came to work at the Beef and how she came to be friends with Mikey. And the one where Nat goes into labor and she can't get in touch with anyone, so she very reluctantly calls her mom to come down and help her through it. And so we got to see Jamie Lee Curtis again as this manic Berzato matriarch, which was great. Yeah, that was fantastic. It's not as, you know, fast-paced and stressful, and it's all about the chaos of the kitchen as the first 2 seasons. This one's a bit slower and a bit more reflective and a bit more contemplative, and a bit quieter, but I appreciated that kind of change of pace. I mean, any TV show has to keep evolving. That's even why in the show, Carmy wants to come up with a new menu every day because he wants the restaurant to keep evolving. And that seemed like that had a parallel with Christopher Storer. Doesn't want the show to get complacent and get into a routine. He wants the show to keep evolving. So yeah, I loved The Bear Season 3. Now I've got to wait a fucking year for Season 4, which I'll then watch in a day. But yeah, that's everything I watched in June. Nowhere near as much as May, but some really good stuff. I hope you all had a good June and watched some great movies and stuff, and I'll speak to you next month. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.